What happens when a wealthy banker mocks a poor driver's faith and throws money in the gutter? He didn't know a silent stranger was watching. What happens next will force the arrogant man to face a truth that money can never buy. In the heart of Makati's business district, Mr. Bongbong stood fuming by his stalled luxury sedan. His Italian suit cost 150,000 pesos, but it couldn't fix a dead engine. He checked his gold watch with trembling hands. 8:45 a.m. He was missing a 50 million peso board meeting that could define his career. In a fit of rage, he kicked his tire, cursing the humidity of Manila. Just then, a colorful, aging jeepney pulled to the curb with a rhythmic screech of brakes. Mang Jun, a 62-year-old driver, hopped out with a calm smile. He clutched a small wooden rosary hanging from his rearview mirror before approaching. "Need a hand, sir?" he asked softly. Bongbong sneered at the man's grease-stained shirt and worn-out rubber slippers. "Stay away from my car, old man," he barked. "You probably make in a year what I spend on a single lunch." Mang Jun didn't flinch, his eyes reflecting a peace Bongbong couldn't understand. "God provides for us all, sir. Let me check the battery." Bongbong laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed against the glass skyscrapers. "God? Your faith is for losers. If your God was real, you wouldn't be driving this piece of junk for 20 pesos a ride." He reached into his leather wallet, pulled out a 500 peso bill, and dropped it into the muddy gutter. "Pray to that. It'll do more for you than your Jesus." Mang Jun silently knelt, picked up the wet bill, and wiped the mud off it with his sleeve. As he placed it in his dashboard's prayer box, a man in a plain white barong Tagalog watched them from the sidewalk, his presence as still as the mountain. Have you ever felt that those who have the least are often the ones who offer the most? What do you think truly defines a person's worth in the eyes of the Creator? 20 years ago, Mang Jun was not just a driver on the crowded streets of Manila. He was known as Chief Engineer Junito, the lead foreman for the most ambitious coastal bridge projects in the Visayas region. People called his work the honest build because he flatly refused every bribe offered by corrupt contractors. He never used cheap, sandy concrete or thin steel bars to save a few pesos. His reputation was as solid as the foundations he poured into the earth. But the year 2013 changed everything when the massive earthquake and Typhoon Yolanda struck the islands. The destruction was absolute. Jun did not just lose his house to the wind and waves. He lost his small construction firm because of a choice most men would call foolish. Instead of keeping the remaining capital to save himself, he used every centavo to pay his workers their full salaries. He even covered the funeral costs for the families of those who had perished in the storm. The tragedy, however, went even deeper than financial ruin. In 2015, his daughter, Grace, was diagnosed with a critical heart condition. She needed a valve replacement that cost more than a simple man could ever dream of. Jun spent his last savings, sold his professional engineering equipment, and eventually sacrificed his family land. But the hospital bills were a mountain he simply could not climb. Grace passed away, leaving Jun with a hollow chest and nothing but his faith. He bought an old, battered jeepney to keep food on his table and moved to Manila. He became a ghost in the heavy traffic, a loser in the eyes of arrogant men like Bongbong. Yet every single Sunday, he could be found at Quiapo Church. He did not pray for riches or revenge. He prayed for the restless souls of those who looked down on him from their high towers. Now, a truth is about to be revealed that was hidden for many years. If you believe that God sees every sacrifice and acts in His own perfect time, please support this story with a like and subscribe to our channel. Mang Jun lived in a tiny, cramped room in Tondo, waking up at 3 a.m. every single day to start his route. He treated every passenger like royalty, even those who shouted at him when the traffic slowed to a crawl. In his small house, he kept a tin can labeled "For Others," where he dropped 50 pesos every evening. One rainy Tuesday, while Jun was wiping the gray smog from his windshield, the man in the white barong Tagalog approached him again. He was not a beggar or a passenger. He introduced himself as a legal representative for a massive international conglomerate. The stranger's voice was calm, yet it carried a weight of authority that silenced the city noise. Why do you think some people stay kind, even after the world has taken everything from them? The stranger in the white barong stood perfectly still amidst the swirling chaos of the Manila traffic. He handed Mang Jun a heavy blue folder, its texture thick and official. "Engineer Junito, Do you remember a certain 5-hectare marshland in Cavite? The man asked. June nodded slowly, his mind drifting back to 1998. Back then, developers called that land worthless and offered him peanuts for it. He had refused to sell, even when the banks came knocking during his darkest years. The stranger explained that the government's new mega-airport link was designed to pass exactly through that forgotten patch of earth. Because June had kept the original titles and never signed them away during his bankruptcy, the land was now the most valuable property in the province. The valuation has reached 180 million pesos, the man said with a slight, knowing smile. Your patience has been a miracle in the making. Before Jun could even find the words to respond, the man vanished into the thick crowd entering the MRT station. Jun sat in his jeepney, his hands trembling as he touched the faded wooden rosary. He thought of his daughter Grace and the medicine he couldn't afford. He thought of the hunger and the many nights he slept in this very driver's seat. He didn't feel a rush of greed, only a deep, cooling peace that washed over his tired soul. 6 months passed, and the world of high finance in Makati began to tremble. The investment bank where Bongbong worked was facing a sudden and hostile takeover. The firm was drowning in 400 million pesos of debt because of Bongbong's reckless offshore gambles. A mysterious, silent partner had quietly bought 51% of the company's shares. Bongbong was terrified, his expensive suit now soaked in cold sweat as he prepared a desperate presentation. He walked into the boardroom, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The heavy mahogany doors opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal barong walked in. He looked sharp, dignified, and carried himself with the quiet strength of a mountain. It was Mang Jun, the man Bongbong had called a loser. Bongbong's jaw dropped so far it seemed he would lose his breath entirely. He stammered, pointing a shaking finger. You, the driver? This is a cruel joke. Mang Jun did not raise his voice or show a single spark of anger. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed a single object on the expensive desk. It was the same 500 peso bill, still stained with the dried mud of the gutter. You told me to pray to this bill because it was more powerful than God, Mang Jun said, his voice steady and calm. I did pray. I prayed that the man who threw it would eventually learn a hard truth. A bank account can be emptied in a single day, but the wealth of a soul is forever. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of years of arrogance finally meeting the wall of truth. Do you think true power lies in the numbers on a screen or in the strength of a person's character? Bongbong stared at the muddy 500 peso bill as if it were a ghost haunting his mahogany desk. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, and the air in the boardroom felt suddenly thin, like the heat on a crowded Manila street. He looked at Mang Jun, searching for a sign of mockery or triumph, but found only a steady, piercing compassion. The silence stretched until it was unbearable, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning that Bongbong could no longer afford. I didn't fire you because I wanted to see you suffer, Mang Jun said, his voice echoing with a dignity that filled the room. I kept you because you have forgotten what it means to be a neighbor. He pushed a set of heavy, rusted keys across the polished table. They belonged to an old green and red jeepney parked in the basement, a machine that smelled of diesel and hard work. The company will survive under new leadership, but your position as a master is over. Bongbong's hands shook as he reached for the keys, the cold metal biting into his soft palms. You want me to drive? In the heat? With the beggars? He whispered, his voice cracking like dry earth. Mang Jun stood up, looking taller than any skyscraper in Makati. If you want to lead people, you must first learn how to carry them on your back. You will drive the Pasig to Quiapo route for 6 months. Every single centavo you earn will be counted and sent to the orphanage where my daughter was once a volunteer. Bongbong looked down at his Italian shoes, realizing they were never meant for the pedals of a common man's life. Now, the moment of ultimate testing has arrived for a soul lost in pride. If this story of humbling grace touches your heart, please support it with a like and subscribe to our channel. The former banker walked out of the glass tower, the sun hitting his face with a heat he hadn't felt in years. He climbed into the driver's seat of the aging jeepney, his expensive suit already wrinkling against the vinyl. In the passenger seat sat a man in a plain white barong Tagalog, looking out at the horizon. He didn't say a word, but his presence was a shield against the mockery of the passing world. As Bong Bong turned the ignition, the engine roared to life, coughing out a cloud of black smoke that signaled the end of his old life. Have you ever been brought low only to discover that it was the only way to truly see the heavens? The first week on the Pasig-Quiapo route felt like a descent into purgatory for Bong Bong. His hands, once soft from typing on expensive keyboards, were now covered in painful, weeping blisters. The tropical sun beat down on the metal roof of the jeepney, turning the driver's seat into a furnace. He sweated through his remaining silk shirts until they were ruined by grease and salt. Every time a passenger climbed in, Bong Bong felt a surge of old resentment, but the memory of Mang Jun's calm face kept him silent. He had to learn the complex language of the streets, the hand signals, the rhythmic tapping on the roof, and the humble para po of the passengers. The man in the white barong Tagalog sat in the back corner of the jeepney every single day. He never paid a fare, but no one ever asked him for one. He simply watched Bong Bong with eyes that seemed to see every selfish thought still hiding in the banker's heart. One sweltering afternoon near the Quiapo church, a woman carrying a crying infant and 3 heavy plastic bags struggled to board. The other passengers ignored her, rushing to find their own space. Bong Bong, for the first time in his life, felt a strange tug in his chest that wasn't greed or fear. He set the handbrake, stepped out of the driver's door, and lifted the heavy bags for her. He even held the baby for a brief moment while she settled onto the narrow bench. When he returned to his seat, his heart was racing, but not from anger. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw the man in the white barong nod almost imperceptibly. A small, quiet change was beginning to take root in the cracked soil of Bong Bong's pride. He realized that the 20 peso coins he collected were not just metal. They were the sweat and hopes of people he had once stepped over. If you believe that even the hardest heart can be softened by the weight of real life, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. By the end of the 3rd month, Bong Bong no longer looked like a banker in disguise. His skin was bronzed by the sun, and his movements were quick and purposeful. He began to recognize the regulars, the old fish vendor, the tired student, and the blind beggar who always sat near the door. He started keeping a cold bottle of water under his seat to share with those who looked faint from the heat. One evening, after a particularly long shift, he found himself alone in the jeepney with the man in the white barong. The man leaned forward and touched Bong Bong's shoulder with a hand that felt surprisingly warm and solid. "You are starting to see them now," the man whispered, "not as numbers in a ledger, but as my brothers and sisters." Bong Bong wanted to ask who he was, but the man had already stepped out into the evening mist of the Pasig River. Why is it that we often have to lose our status before we can finally find our humanity? By the 5th month of driving, the transformation of Bong Bong was no longer just about his sun-darkened skin or his calloused hands. It was written in the way he looked at the world from the driver's seat of his aging jeepney. One humid afternoon, the heavy Manila sky turned a bruised purple, and a torrential monsoon rain began to flood the streets of Quiapo. The traffic became a stagnant river of rusted metal and frustrated shouts. In the middle of the deluge, Bong Bong saw a young man standing by the road, frantically waving for help. Beside him, an elderly woman was collapsed on the sidewalk, her face pale as ash. Without a second thought for his schedule or his earnings, Bong Bong swerved his jeepney to the curb. He jumped out into the knee-deep water, his clothes instantly soaked, and lifted the frail woman into the back of the vehicle. The passengers inside moved to make room, their faces softened by a shared sense of urgency. "To the hospital, Bilis!" someone shouted. Bong Bong drove like he never had before, not with the reckless arrogance of a banker, but with the focused precision of a man carrying a life in his hands. He navigated through narrow alleys and flooded side streets, ignoring the protests of his engine. The man in the white barong Tagalog was there, sitting quietly near the entrance, his hand resting on the woman's forehead. His presence seemed to radiate a calm that kept the woman breathing despite the chaos. When they finally reached the emergency room doors, Bong Bong didn't just drop them off. He carried the woman inside, stayed until she was stable, and even paid for her initial medicines using the coins he had collected that day. As he walked back to his jeepney, dripping wet and exhausted, he saw the man in the white barong standing by the driver's door. For the first time, Bong Bong didn't see a mysterious passenger. He saw a friend. The stranger reached out and handed Bong Bong a small dry towel. "You finally understand," the man said softly. True wealth is not what you keep in a vault, but what you are willing to give away when someone is drowning. Bongbong felt a warmth spread through his chest that no Italian suit could ever provide. He realized that the losers he once mocked were the very ones who held the city's soul together through their quiet endurance. Now, the final test of his new heart is approaching, where the past and future will meet in a single moment of truth. If you believe that God uses our struggles to break our pride and build our purpose, please support this story with a like and subscribe to our channel. The following morning, Mang Jun arrived at the jeepney terminal. He didn't come to check the earnings or the mechanical state of the vehicle. He came to look into Bongbong's eyes. He saw a man who no longer flinched at the smell of diesel or the touch of a beggar's hand. Mang Jun took the muddy 500 peso bill, which he had kept all this time, and handed it back to Bongbong. "This bill has finished its work," Mang Jun said. "It taught you how to pray, and it taught you how to serve." Bongbong looked at the money, then at the keys in his hand. He realized that he didn't want his old life back. He wanted to keep the peace he had found in the middle of the noise. The man in the white barong was gone, but his reflection seemed to linger in every puddle on the street, reminding Bongbong that he was never truly driving alone. Have you ever realized that the person you used to be is the only person you truly needed to lose? The 6 months of driving finally came to an end, but Bongbong did not rush back to his leather office chair. He spent his final day on the route driving in a comfortable silence, his heart light despite the humid Manila air. When he parked the jeepney for the last time at the terminal, he saw Mang Jun waiting for him near a small roadside stall. The old driver was holding 2 cold bottles of calamansi juice and a small worn envelope. "You have completed the journey I set for you," Mang Jun said, handing him the juice. Bongbong took a long drink, feeling the tart sweetness wash away the dust of the road. He looked at his hands. They were rough, scarred, and permanently stained with grease, yet he felt cleaner than he ever had in his expensive Italian suits. Mang Jun opened the envelope and showed him a stack of official receipts from the orphanage. "Every centavo you earned has built a new dormitory for the children. They will sleep safely because you chose to drive." Bongbong felt a lump in his throat that had nothing to do with thirst. He realized that his punishment had actually been his liberation from a prison of his own making. "What happens now?" Bongbong asked, his voice low and humble. Mang Jun smiled and pointed toward the glass towers of Makati that shimmered in the distance. "The bank is yours to lead again, but you will not lead it from the top down. You will lead it from the heart out." As they spoke, the man in the white barong Tagalog walked past them one last time. He didn't stop, but he paused just long enough to place a hand on the hood of the old jeepney. The rusted metal seemed to gleam for a moment under his touch, as if the machine itself was being blessed for its service. Bongbong watched him walk toward the setting sun, knowing that he would never look at a stranger on the street the same way again. If you believe that the greatest lessons are often learned in the hardest places, please support this journey with a like and subscribe to our channel. That evening, Bongbong returned to his penthouse apartment, but it felt cold and empty compared to the vibrant life of the streets. He sat on his balcony, looking out over the city lights of Manila. He realized that the thousands of people moving below were not just consumers or assets, but souls with stories, burdens, and dreams. He took the muddy 500 peso bill and framed it, placing it on his desk where everyone could see it. It would serve as a permanent reminder that the God he once mocked is the one who truly holds the keys to every heart. Mang Jun had taught him that a man's worth is not measured by what he owns, but by how many people he is willing to carry when the road gets steep. The silence of the night was no longer lonely. It was full of a new, quiet purpose. Are you ready to let go of the things that weigh your soul down, so you can finally be truly free? Bongbong returned to the bank's boardroom, but he did not wear his expensive Italian suit. He chose a clean, simple white barong, just like the one the mysterious stranger wore. He sat among the directors and shared his new vision for the firm. "We will no longer profit from the desperation of others," he declared firmly. "From today, we invest in people, not just papers." He looked at the muddy 500 peso bill framed on the wall behind him. It was a silent witness to his journey from a mocker to a servant. He established a fund for drivers like Mang Jun, ensuring they had fair loans and medical care. He realized that God had not punished him, but had invited him to a life of true significance. One evening, While walking through the busy streets of Quiapo, he saw Mang Jun's old jeepney. He smiled, knowing that the humble vehicle had carried him to his own salvation. The man in the white barong Tagalog stood on the corner, blending into the crowd of workers heading home. He watched Bongbong buy a simple meal from a street vendor and share it with a hungry child. There were no loud miracles or dramatic signs, only the quiet power of a changed heart. The truth had come into the light, and the structures of greed had crumbled from within. Bongbong finally understood that Jesus doesn't always come in clouds of glory. Sometimes he wears sandals and waits by a stalled car in the heat of Manila. Peace settled over his soul, a deep calm that the rise and fall of the stock market could never touch. He breathed in the humid night air, feeling grateful for every blister and every coin he had earned. His faith was no longer for losers. It was the only thing that made him a winner in the eyes of the Lord. True success is measured by the lives we touch and the burdens we help others carry. If this story reminded you that God sees everything and acts in His own perfect time, please support it. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and write the word faith in the comments if you also believe in divine justice and second chances.